Hey guys! Today we're going to be reviewing Jojo Rabbit.
So today we want to talk about Jojo Rabbit. Before we go into exactly why we think it's so great, we kind of wanted to make sure that our videos are a little bit friendlier to people who have not watched the movies that we're reviewing yet. And so now we've decided to include like a non-spoiler part like at the front of each of our videos. So this is basically our non-spoiler part for Jojo Rabbit.
I mean, was it what we expected? I would say for me, it was entirely not what I expected. I thought it was gonna be like a really like messy film, but there were so many points that proved it to be so much more than what it was on the surface level. So I really enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, I thought it would be a little bit more political, but I think that what we got in the end is something that is so like it's preciously personal. And I think that is very meaningful, and like it's less, and it really is less about the politics and more about the politics just being a setting for a way for a kid trying to find his identity and his courage and his empathy in a world that tells him otherwise.
Yep, and that's about it for the non-spoiler part. We're gonna dive right into the spoilers part right now. So if you haven't watched the movie and you intend to watch it, yeah, thank you for actually tuning in even though you haven't watched the Jojo Rabbit movie yet. But for those who have stayed, please stay on and check out the rest of our video.
Yes.
Yeah, alright, that's it.
Okay.
To start off with some points that I felt were not the best about it, the beginning started off really slowly. It was a bit sluggish when they were setting up Jojo's character, but they do this in a way that is very long. I think the first 15 or 20 minutes, and it took a really long time to gain momentum. I also thought that there were some characters that were not necessary to the plot. Yorkie, Jojo's best friend, was just a little bit extra in his role. I guess in one sense he does show what Jojo would have been if he stayed on and became a true Nazi soldier, but that's the only role he plays in essence. Also, the butterfly is a very interesting imagery that they use, a very symbolic reference, but it's also a very confusing thing. They never really established what the butterfly meant, because the butterfly could mean love in some scenes, and then it also could mean his mom dying in other scenes. So it really confused me when I was watching it, and that's it for criticism. And now for some positive parts, childhood in conflict.
Okay, so there are 3 core messages that we felt Jojo Rabbit was trying to say. First, we're talking about childhood in conflict. Secondly, we're talking about baseless prejudice and its solution. And thirdly, we're going to talk about how these 2 things are like laced together. Yes. So for my part, it's going to be about childhood in conflict. Obviously, Jojo Rabbit is a movie very much about a child, very much about Jojo and his personal experiences. And so it is very fitting that one of its main messages, or one of our main takeaways, is about childhood, and specifically childhood in conflict. So what we see right from the start is that children are people that are very impressionable. And because of that, Jojo needs something to cling towards in order to know who he is or to find out his identity. And so in the start of the movie, we see him following along. If they ask him a question, he'll be like, yes, I love to kill. And furthermore, he looks like Yorkie for help even before he says that. So we can see that he is someone that really follows along with the crowd and tries to be someone that fits in. Furthermore, we have Hitler, an imaginary friend that tells him what to do in certain cases. So we can see him clinging to this social expectation of being a Nazi, or this perceived idea of authority, of people telling him who he should be. And furthermore, we get that like very explicitly when Elsa tells him,
"You're not a Nazi. You're a 10-year-old kid who likes dressing up in a funny uniform and wants to be part of a club."
He wants to be a Nazi. He wants to prove himself by fighting, because that's something that everyone else seems to want to do. And furthermore, it's something that propaganda tells him that he should be doing. But more than that, the movie tells us explicitly that the propaganda that Jojo clings to isn't something that it supports. Rosie even says
10-year-olds shouldn't be celebrating war and talking politics.
they should be climbing trees and falling off them. They should be making mistakes, essentially, and learning from them, not fighting other people's wars. And this is something that really is reflected in the plot, because the plot is literally driven by Jojo's attempts and then failures to be a proper Nazi. He fails to kill the rabbit, he fails to prove himself, he even blew himself up, then he stayed home, didn't even go for the camp, and then he met Elsa, and then he essentially fails to turn a Jew in, even though he is technically supposed to. And furthermore, Jojo is associated with being a cowardly rabbit, which is the exact opposite of what Hitler apparently wants his youth army to be. But the irony is that in the end, that behavior of being a cowardly rabbit and this ability to empathize with others despite his internalized propaganda is the thing that keeps him alive. He runs from the battle, he hides Elsa, he hides and survives, something that a rabbit would do. And even though this is something that was ridiculed by other people, it's exactly what keeps him alive in the end. Furthermore, this idea of not supporting the propaganda that Jojo has internalized is something that's also reflected in the camera techniques that we see. Jojo wants the gore and the glory of war. He fantasizes about nobly sacrificing himself for Hitler. And so you would think that in his perspective, there would be people nobly dying for the cause. Close up on the grit and the violence and the spray of dirt in battle. But instead what we get is that the camera glides across the battle. We only see a general idea of the chaos and the danger. And in terms of color, we don't get darkness or dark green and grey, which is what you would normally see in like war movies. Instead, we get brightly lit, pastel colours still evident. So even in war, we still see through the eyes of a child. Even when there's death, it's more of an association with loss rather than outright gory death. We see Jojo focusing on two dead women, and you get the feeling that he's actually thinking about his mom, about what he's lost emotionally, as opposed to the violence that they died in.
See that American's there? Just go give him a hug. Go, run! Let's go!
Now go home, look after that sister of yours. Okay?
Get away, Jew!
Hey!
Get away!
What's going on?
The Jew!
And in the end, we see that as much as Jojo wanted to be part of the conflict, to die nobly for some noble cause, the camera and the story excludes him from it because he is a child. For childhood in conflict, we see Jojo being a child, being impressionable, internalizing the identity that is enforced by the state. And then we get the story and the camera techniques excluding him from what? Preventing him from becoming the thing that he's told by society he should be. Yes. Now on to Noah about baseless prejudice and its solution.
And on to baseless prejudice, it's definitely about larger social ideas like cognitive dissonance and the lies we all fool ourselves into believing to fit in. But I don't really want to talk about the larger things. Let's talk more about Jojo. He lives his life following the role that Hitler and all those around him gave him. But with Elsa, with meeting the Jewish girl, this is when he starts letting go of the script. In a literal sense, actually. At first, he writes letters to Elsa, clinging to Nathan as a way to express himself to Elsa. But subsequently, in the end, you see him letting go of the script, sitting in front of her little door and reading a blank piece of paper to her. He doesn't need a script anymore because he's making his own decisions. It's actually coming from his own mind. And at first, he needs Hitler to hype him up in front of the mirror. But in the end, he doesn't need anyone to tell him what to do. He tells himself.
Jojo Betzler, 10.5 years old. Today, just do what you can.
This is Jojo navigating identity. He's exploring what a Nazi means to him, and if he even is a Nazi, and what he is if he's not a Nazi, if he's not part of the club. I believe that Taika Waititi is saying something a lot more than just being a kid or innocence. It's about personal relationships with Rosie, his mother, And with Elsa, deep down, Jojo and his mom have such a tight bond that, you know, despite all their initial issues with Jojo being a strong Nazi believer, and his mom actually being a part of the revolution, that they will naturally face a lot of conflict, but the love and the passion that comes out when the two of them are acting their relationship to each other is really shown in especially my favorite scene, the dinner scene, where the mom brings back the father by putting ashes on her face to simulate the beard. That was such an amazing performance, which blew me away. And Jojo's relationship with Elsa as well. You see their relationship develop from being strangers to being really hostile towards each other, threatening even, to becoming something that where they will trust each other with their lives. And we look at Elsa through Jojo's perspective a lot. When we first see Elsa, we get shots almost like a horror movie where Jojo's walking towards this door. You also see the hand curling around the door, the hand walking down the staircase as Elsa toys with Jojo a little. And it's very symbolic because it shows Jojo's perspective of Elsa. First of all, he sees her as this monster, this winged, horned creature that he believes all Jews are. But this monster also establishes her playfulness. It serves both ways of showing Jojo's opinion of her and her personality as well. Jojo communicates with Elsa primarily through letters, by making up that he knows her boyfriend Nathan, while actually all those letters were being written by him. They almost agreed on having communication through this farce, through this make-up world that they actually made. It circumvented the idea that Jews and Nazis cannot be friends, because Jojo is pretending to be Nathan and Elsa is pretending that she is communicating to Nathan. So both of them can have a conversation through this Nathan character. And knowing Elsa as a friend was actually a big thing that pushed Jojo towards the rejection actually of Nazism and from accepting Jews as normal people. And that's it for what I have for Baseless Prejudice. And now we'll be talking about Shoelaces and how it is all laced together.
Alright, so we've actually separately brought you through two different journeys that happened throughout Jojo Rabbit. So firstly, we told you about childhood in conflict and the progression towards growing up. And secondly, Noah told you about Baseless Prejudice and the progression towards the solution to prejudice. Yes, and lacing all these together, we see that both of these journeys are laced together in Jojo's mother and his relationship with her, and everything that she left behind for him.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And when Jojo looks in the mirror, and for the second time, he promises that he will do what he can. And to do what you can is something that's tangled up with the resistance from the start. Rosie actually says this at the really early on in the movie when they saw people hanged for helping Jews. And Jojo asks his mom, what's wrong with them? What happened to them? And she replies, they did what they could. Giving a hint at what, that she herself was a resistance supporter. This phrase is therefore part of accepting those different and fighting for them as fiercely as you would fight for one of your own kind, in a sense.
But doing what I can is also something linked with shoelaces. His mother scolds him at the start for not tying his shoelaces himself, even though he can. And throughout the movie, we see different instances of him trying, failing, or succeeding to tie his shoelaces. So he couldn't do it right at the start, and he couldn't do it when his mom was just hanging there. But eventually the resolution is that he can tie shoelaces. Mm-hmm. And that happens when he's leading Elsa out of the house. He's accepted her as a friend, and instead of keeping her for himself, he's leading her towards freedom. This essentially is him growing up and being independent. But in that is also the final solution and conclusion to basic prejudice. Mm-hmm. This is further emphasized by their conversation. She asks him, is it dangerous out there? And he says, extremely. This is a mirror of exactly what happened with his mom. But right now, he's not the one afraid of leaving the house. In fact, he's turned that into bravery, and he's trying to help Elsa do the same. Yes.
And that's our take on what Jojo Rabbit is like. So once again, thanks for watching our video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any opinions, please just drop us a comment or DM us. We'd love to hear from you. So stay tuned for our next video, which will be coming sometime. We'll find out. We'll release more in the coming future. But for now, thanks for watching and stay cool.
Bye.
Bye. Oh yeah.